Real Sounds of Africa to once again kick off the World Football Phone-In. This morning we're talking football in Europe and South America and players from over there playing in our leagues. If you'd like to join in the conversation, the number to call is 0808 5909 693. That's 0808 5909 693. We've got the Colonel, Mina Rzouki, taking care of any questions you've got on European football and players from over there playing in our leagues. Good morning, Mina.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks very much. Thanks for asking. Tim never does that. Oh, he's over the other side. The Legendino, Tim Vickery, asking and taking care of any questions on South American football and players from over there playing in our side. Tim.
Good morning. Yeah, because you're a force of nature, I always assume that you're all right. You know, this is a creature who doesn't seem to need sleep. So I just assume that you're firing on all cylinders.
Just talk about your lack of manners and leave it at that. Okay? Can we move on now?
Oh, he's trying to be nice to you. He's never nice to you.
This is true. Thank you very much for saying that.
Talking about lack of manners.
Yeah, go on.
And I discovered this week that it's disrespectful. It's considered disrespectful to refer to the new Europa League champions as Man U. I always called them Man U. My old man, we always call them Man U. And just this week, people have said, no, you can't do that. That's wrong. So
who
apologies
said
if
who said that?
Supporters of said club have said it's not correct. It's disrespectful.
We've got one of those supporters here in the studio on the other side. Why is it disrespectful, Paul? He doesn't know, but he got told it was, so therefore it is disrespectful. That doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't make sense.
I don't understand it.
Yeah, and when I call Tottenham the Spuds, nobody complains. You know? Did you get it? Spurs, Spuds? Anyway, well, it's in fact, let's not even call them Man U. Let's call them Manu. That would be disrespectful. Look, let's kick this off. Normally we would, you know, in the old days, we'd have been talking about the FA Cup. You know, we'd have been hanging out the bunting by now and preparing ourselves. And young boys and girls all over the country would have tucked themselves in early to wake up early for FA Cup final day.
The TV coverage will be starting around now, wouldn't it? It would go all the way to the big kickoff.
In those days, we didn't have all-night TV. You know, now we're taking you back to an era before you were even a twinkle in your parents' eyes, Mina.
Oh, God. So we're going back to the 50s then.
Now, do you not see how polite I am, suggesting that you're only 18?
Sweet. But I really am very young.
Well, there you go. Good for you. Anyway, this question from Rishi in Newcastle upon Tyne. It's a question that everybody wants to know, and it's about Manchester City's summer signing, Bernardo Silva from Monaco, Portuguese international, £43 million, went through yesterday, as in Friday. Is he worth that, Mina?
Yeah, he's definitely worth that. I mean, there was once, I think it was about Redondo at the time. I think Sir Alex Ferguson said that he must have magnets in his feet because the ball just never leaves him. And I feel like Silva is pretty much the same as that. He is a sublime playmaker. Everything goes through him. He's just had so many goals and assists this season. He's so good on the ball, and he's smart. He's got a high IQ. He knows what spaces to occupy. He knows the right passes to make. So I think he's very much the kind of player that Pep really needs at the moment, or one that he can at least mold into the guy that he needs to change Manchester City at the moment. Again, one of those, technicians. He's better technically than he is anything else. He's not the physical guy, but they've been so reliant on Silva that they need somebody who can, help alongside him. And I personally don't see De Bruyne cutting it. So I think this is a wonderful move. I hope that he actually comes to his own because he's been magnificent for Monaco.
And interestingly enough, Tim, your friend and mine, Broadway Danny Rose, has suggested that this is the one player all season that he couldn't lay...
Yeah, he said he's the best player that he's ever played across.
That he couldn't lay a glove on. And Silva had him in his pocket the whole way through. I mean, to do that to Danny Rose... that would have taken some talent, wouldn't it?
That's it's always nice to hear those opinions, isn't it? From the people who are out there trying to cope with him. So that's very, very interesting indeed. And judging from what Mina's saying and from the much less of him that I've seen, I'm excited to see how he slots in next year. When, you know, after a kind of year's reconnaissance, I think we're going to see the real Guardiola Man City in the coming campaign.
You reckon?
I don't think so.
I do.
Yeah. Why don't you
Do
think?
You think?
Why don't
You think
so,
he's still got
Mina?
more dead wood to clear away, Mina?
Can he get rid of all of it? My feeling is that it's not really just about the team. I understand that everyone keeps talking about that the team is so rubbish and the team is so poorly balanced and all of that, but we are talking about a side that spent more money than any other team in the Premier League. So at the end of the day, it's not for a lack of money. They bought the players, they just bought the wrong players. So you could say there's a lack of leadership, yeah, perhaps, but I think the beauty of English football is in its simplicity, and the fact that it's based around, you know, the type of football that Guardiola has often criticized in the past, when he used to refer to Real Madrid as being a team of athletic players, which was almost considered an insult, because basically what he's trying to say is that they're physically really good but not that much better. So I feel like on this occasion he overcomplicates things when it comes to his side. Things like choosing to play Navas as a fullback and so on and so forth. I don't, barring buying an entire new defense and perhaps a midfield, I'm not entirely sure what's he going to change at the end of the day. He needs to change the entire team for it to be something special and mold it especially to him. But a team that plays in exactly the Guardiola way, is that going to win in the Premier League? It's weird when Mourinho was saying, that when he started talking about poets, and he was saying along the lines of, the poets, that what are they going to do at the end of the day? They don't win finals,
I was
right?
imagining you jumping up and down with pleasure when he said that. When he said,
it's funny actually, because it's so many.
Poetry.
Yeah, so many people wrote to me saying, you must have loved the speech. And I was like, yeah, but it kind of depends on the team. I love Mourinho for a certain side, but then I don't want Mourinho at United, and I didn't want Mourinho at Real Madrid. Not because, I just feel like for those two teams, you need a better style of football. You need something to look at that's a bit more entertaining than what he has to offer. And really, that final against Ajax, where everyone is sitting there talking about, he got this tactically spot on, wonderful. I mean, Jesus Christ, Ajax are good, but come on, they're teenagers at the end of the day. I mean, we shouldn't be watching counter-attacking football, tight-knit, let's organise ourselves, make sure they don't have any chances, make sure their striker doesn't get anywhere near the ball, and then just counter with all your might. This is Manchester United. You should be dominating that game and scoring 100 more. The opponent's coach should be stunned and said, well, he should be turning around and saying, well, it's Manchester United. Instead, he started complaining. I mean, obviously, perhaps, he was bitter about the result, but I don't feel like Mourinho is a coach for United. I think that he's done well, don't get me wrong, but there is a certain time, or there's a certain team that can cope without the poets, and there are certain teams where you sort of do need the poets. But Manchester City and Pep Guardiola, I feel like he needs to realize sometimes that you just need to simplify things. It's the lack of mentality in City, and I don't know how many veterans or experienced professionals or he's going to do on a man management level that's going to turn this club around. So I can't see this being a second season, especially not when you have the motivational skills of Antonio Conte, you have Mourinho in his second season, and who knows what's going to happen. I still can't see them doing anything that special.
You have been warned. The Colonel has got a bee in her bonnet tonight, if not a flea in her ear. All that was triggered by a simple question.
Watch him now win everything.
A simple
Just
question about Bernardo Silva triggered all of that. So, would you like to trigger her ire? Then feel free on 08085 909 693. Let's speak to Darren in London first. And apologies for keeping you waiting, Darren. I was trying to get to you, but you saw
I'm sorry.
you see how Mina is tonight. So it's all yours, mate. It's all yours. Hello.
Just say I'm very happy to calling you tonight.
Oh, really? I'm glad to hear that, mate.
No, because I get to speak to the charming Mina Mizuki first one.
Of course. You take your time. Go ahead.
Hi. I just wanted to ask you about AC Milan. With the new Chinese takeover that's gone through, and with them being recently linked with players like Morata, Madrid, Kessie at Atalanta, do you think they'll probably do better next season? And do you think they'll probably get those players as well?
You know what? Italian media seem rather certain that they're going to get, well, for one, Alvaro Morata. And I think that could happen also because for personal reasons, he's engaged to an Italian girl. So I think that he wouldn't mind a return to Italian football, if I'm honest. And considering how much money he costs, Juventus is not willing to pay, because that would be the first team that he would want to go back to, just because, you know, it's going back. So I think it's legitimate to think, yeah, he can go to Milan. And my problem is that I still don't think their scouting is very good. If I'm trying to build a team from scratch, and with Milan, what they have is a nice youth section. They've got very good up-and-coming young players, especially in the back line, from the likes of Calabria, and Romagnoli, and of course their goalkeeper Donnarumma, who is the most important one, and he must stay for them to really mount a challenge next season. But I think they need guys, I think they need to bring in quality in the sense of veteran experience, leaders in the dressing room that can pull it all together. So my fear is that what they're going to do is buy all this up-and-coming talent, or ones who are trying to prove a point, in the likes of Kessie, who's going to move from Atalanta and what they want. And then what you'll have is a bunch of talent, but not enough leaders on the pitch to pull them through when things start to go wrong, or say there's a problem in the game and they're 1-0 down, and they need, you know, these guys on the pitch that will be like, all right, come on, we can do this. That's what worries me about all of it. I do think they're going to have the money, and they did very well this season, despite, in my opinion, a lack of, you know, genuine star-studded talent. With all those youngsters, and with, you know, a lot of controversies and so many red cards, they received 11, more than any other Italian side. You know, they managed to get a place in the Europa League, which is, you know, not bad for them now. But I hope that with more investment next season and a little bit more stability at management level, that they can do more. But we are talking again about a side that's competing with Roma, who has a lot of talent, and who've just brought in Mongi from Sevilla, who's great at scouting even better talent. And then we have, of course, Maurizio Sarri's Napoli, who play by far the best and most entertaining style of football, and they're only set to be more interesting next season. So could Milan finish in the top 4? I don't know. I really don't know. But I think Inter has a better side.
Take the Europa League more serious, because it might be their best chance of getting in the Champions League.
They'll definitely take it seriously. Not because, but I don't think they have a chance of winning it, if I'm very honest. Not that Italian sides historically never. Yeah, you're right. They never really take this tournament seriously for some reason. I just don't think that it's different when you say Roma should have won the Europa League. They had a team built to win something special. Manchester United obviously have a team built to win the trophy, and you know that they're going to beat most of their opponents. I don't think Milan will be able to cut through the 5th or 6th best team in Germany or in England. So when it comes to their opponents, it's really about the luck of the draw. They will take it seriously, but if it means finishing in the top 4 in Italy, they'll go for that more than anything, because then for the season afterwards, Italy has 4 teams into the Champions League, so they'll be concentrating on that. I doubt that the Europa League will have their best players playing in it.
Do you think, though, in terms of the Europa League, do you think the young players that are going to be probably playing in it, you know, like in terms of the goalkeeper and probably the defenders, they'll probably help them in terms of, if they do get to, like, the Champions League, like probably the following season, they'll probably have that experience of probably knockout football in terms of Europe?
Well, it's vital for them to build that experience. I think that it's still a bit of a pipe dream to reach the Champions League in 2 years. I'm not saying never say never. We really don't know. I feel like Inter is better positioned to challenge next season if they can actually get their act together, only because of their squad and the various talents within that. There's more balance there. But if we are going for youth, then yeah, of course you should start playing. The problem is that Milan don't really have an option. Their squad is young, so they have to play those guys. Donnarumma is their starring, goalkeeper. He is the man to rely upon, and he's a guy that's being chased by Real Madrid, Manchester United, Juventus. Everyone wants this kid. He's young, but he is supposed to be the heir to Gianluigi Buffon, and his displays show that he is really very special. If he stays with Milan, that would be great for them. But their backline is young, so it's not like they can sit there and trade them and bring in, these experienced guys that they have on the bench. They don't have that. So they will be giving those guys a chance, and they've done a really exceptional job this season, considering how young they are and for many how little experience they have. So if they play in the Europa League, then perhaps obviously they'll have more experience going into the Champions League. But that's not saying much. Look at Monaco. For many of these guys, it was their first time playing something so, big, such as the Champions League semi-final, and they did so well in that. You don't necessarily have to have experience. You need a coach who's able to make you feel confident when you take the big stage, who will help you in organization so that you're always covered and you feel like you're within a unit that can help one another out. It relies heavily on that, and they do well to keep Vincenzo Montella.
Tim, can I get a word in edgeways now, do you think? Tim, what do you think? Darren,
She's
thank
meaner
you.
than the average pundit, isn't she?
Well, tonight she is. Darren, thank you for the call. And feel free to, call again. 0808 5909 693 is our number.
I quite like it was like a one-on-one.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. No, it's all for you, girl. It's all for you. Anyway, this is from Alistair, who says, and this is some other kid that people have got their eye on. He says, thanks for the fantastic job that you all do making such a great programme. I've read this week that Real Madrid have signed a 16-year-old player from Flamenco and wondered how and wondered how the Brazilian public view the Spanish giants along with the other sides that pay top dollar for young South American players. Are they seen as an evil enemy, stealing the future stars from their respective teams and possibly denying those teams and their fans future glory? Or are they viewed in a heroic sense as the team that will buy the young player and secure the club's financial future and allow that club to recruit and develop more homegrown talent? Good question, really. And tell us more about this kid as well.
Yeah. Well, there isn't a great deal to go on. Vinicius Junior was an absolute star recently in the South American Under-17 Championships, playing in a very, very good Brazil side that were considerably better than the opposition. And that Under-17 level, it can be very, very deceptive. Exactly 10 years ago, there was a player who was similarly fantastic at a similar level, same level, a fellow called Lulinha, who was then linked. He just gave a masterclass in finishing, and he was going to join Chelsea. He was going to do this. He was going to do that. He was going to do the other. 10 years later, his career has taken him to Korea. He plays for Pohang Steelers. He's never really done anything at the top level at all. That under-17 level can be very, very deceptive. We have seen about 20 minutes of him with the senior team with Flamengo. He came on twice as a substitute. I was there for his debut 2 weeks ago at home to Atletico Mineiro, and packed Maracanã, and I just felt sorry for him because the whole crowd wanted to see him. When the teams are announced beforehand, photos up on the scoreboard, he gets the biggest roar, and when he's going to come on, that's the biggest roar of the day, and it's even bigger than the roar for the goal that Flamengo scored. And then he came on and he tried all the tricks and they all failed, and he just looked like a ball boy who'd kind of run onto the field to try and do a few flicks. He got another 10 minutes in the next game, and it was a similar story. There was one little dribble that came off, and there is clearly considerable talent there. But it's so early to know if this talent is going to grow into something which is worth this extraordinary sum of money that Real Madrid are shelling out for him. In that sense, it looks like insanity. And Real Madrid obviously have the money to be able to afford this. But there are so few guarantees at this stage in his career. And
how much is the money?
It's not
million.
Far short of
That's crazy. That is crazy.
But there's also extras that can make it 65, apparently.
Are we talking euros here? Are we talking Nigerian naira?
I think we're talking pounds sterling.
Really?
No, 45 million euros. I don't know, actually.
Euros, right.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But
There's,
they're not that
there's like
different
15
anymore,
different
are they?
versions. No, they're not that different. You're right.
They're not. Yeah, I know.
And
Don't-
Real Madrid are obviously narked at missing out on Neymar and Gabriel Jesus, and they want to make sure of this one. Flamengo have played it very nicely. I think they've given him this little bit of game time to keep him visible. Now it's signed, sealed, delivered. I suspect he'll get less game time now. They'll keep him until either 2018 or 2019, and then move him over. But just to quickly on how the clubs are perceived. The Brazilian fans have become very, very used to losing their biggest stars. And lots of them walk round in shirts of European club sides, so they'll still be able to follow him. To see him yanked away so early, so young, is a shame. And it's even perhaps a shame for Flamengo, although Flamengo are going to get the growth of this deal. It's not like when Santos sold Neymar to Barcelona, and Santos only got a very small percentage because they'd already negotiated it away. But at least Santos were able to keep Neymar for a few years and win things with him and try and build up a support base with that. So Flamengo already have a huge support base, and they would argue that what they badly need is money after years of mismanagement. But back to the point that I make so often, at that age, there are so many changes that you go through. To have to do that in a different culture, in a different language, that for me, as far as I'm concerned, that elevates the degree of difficulty, and that makes you a little bit worried for the young man. I honestly felt sorry for him when I was there for this debut, getting all of this response that he is not yet good enough to live up to. And how will he cope with that? There's 6 months ago he wasn't even a household name in his own home, and now here he is being talked about all over the world. Not easy to cope with even at our age, Dotton, let alone when you're 16.
Speak for yourself. And by the way, I've been corrected in my pronunciation. Of course, it should be Flamengo. I ought to know that by now, but thank you for that person who tweeted to me directly. Yes, of course you can.
I was just going to give you something about the Spanish point of view about it. They think that they've spent... Barcelona firstly offered more money, but apparently he was more interested in the project laid out by Real Madrid. So imagine, as if it's not enough money, Barcelona offered more, apparently. Secondly, they were saying that they've offered these crazy amounts of money for him. I don't know if this is true, but this is what some people are saying. Because nowadays, what Premier League clubs are spending is something that Barcelona and Real Madrid see themselves not being able to spend in the future. So what they're trying to do is get in there as early as possible for talents that they think could be something special. And then if they don't do something, then they can flog them off and, perhaps only make a loss of, not that much of a loss on them if they can flog them off quickly. Just to get in there, because they don't think that in the future they can buy the finished product, and considering what Premier League teams are paying nowadays. So I don't know if that's the reason why they're just going all out with certain money on youngsters.
And Tim, you may have noticed that all Mina has to do tonight is use her feminine wiles on me and just say, "Can I?" And then I'll say, "Of course you can." No, not because... No, the reason is because she asked politely at the beginning of the programme, "How are you, Dotton?" That's all you have to do, you see, Tim. And then that's all you have to do, Mina. And then anytime Mina says, "Can I?" I will absolutely interrupt the programme, stop all proceedings, shut Mr. Vickery up so that you can, Mina. So, and
how are you, Dotton, me old mate? How are you, mucker?
Can I ask for everything nowadays just because I did that?
You can, of course you can. But it's too late for Tim Vickery to ask for anything.
Can I take the rest of the night off?
No, you can't do that. We need you for the next hour and a half, definitely. But talking of pronunciations of Flamengo, this is coming from Bob in Manchester. He says, "Look, if you're going to call United Man U, then to be fair, you've got to call City Man C. You've got to call Liverpool Le Poo." And I can't tell you what he reckons we've got to call Arsenal. I cannot tell you that.
Oh, can I?
and this one for you to ponder on as we go to the 5 Live headlines. This is from one I want you both to ponder on this one. It's a serious one, and make sure you keep it clean, please. Our listener says, I had a laugh to myself when I read today that Harry Redknapp wanted to bring Asu Ikoto, remember him from Tottenham? Asu Ikoto to Birmingham, but that Ikoto at the moment seems more interested in working in the porn industry. So can you ask Tim and Nina if there are any players in their regions that left football for perhaps more questionable jobs?
You're listening to a BBC 5 Live podcast.
If you like this, you might also like this. Flintoff, Savage and the Ping Pong Guy.
Is everybody's hunger in sport different?
I was hungry. I wanted to be the best. For me, you win or that's it.
To find out more about our range of podcasts, click, tap or swipe bbc.co.uk/5live.
Birmingham target Benoit Asu Ikoto is weighing up a career in pornography. Cameroon fullback is a free agent after leaving Metz at the end of the season. Blues boss Harry Redknapp was hoping to tempt him with the project at St Andrews, but the former Tottenham boss has met an unexpected snag in his negotiations. This is the World Football Phone-In. We really are talking football today. Football in Europe and South America, and players from over there playing in our leagues, with the Colonel Mina Riziki over this side of the water and the Legendino Tim Vickery over that side of the water. Tim's a Tottenham fan. So our listener says, can you think of any other footballers in your regions that left football for perhaps more questionable jobs? Let's go to Tim first. After all, he's got a vested interest in the future of Asu Ikoto, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, I don't know about questionable, but another one with a Tottenham link, because he was the brother of the old Tottenham fullback Cyril Knowles, and you're probably just old enough to remember.
I do
him,
remember
Don.
this, Peter Knowles. Yeah, of course.
Who played for the Wolves, and at the peak of his powers,
became
gave
a
it
Jehovah's
up.
Witness, didn't he?
That's right. Yeah, and he gave it up for religion. And he didn't. I don't think he came back. There's one closer to home, closer to my adopted home now, Carlos Roa, who was Argentina's goalkeeper in the 1998 World Cup. He was a Seventh-day Adventist, and
Refused to play at the weekend.
1999. Well, which is a problem, and it meant that he gave up football when he was being linked with Man United in 1999. Now, he didn't stay away for very long, but he was never quite the same again. And he later suffered with cancer, which I think is cleared up, thankfully. He now works as a goalkeeping coach, so it's no longer incompatible, obviously, his profession with the religion. There's one who hasn't given up, but there were rumours that he was going to. A Colombian, left-footed Colombian midfielder called Juan Fernando Quintero, who is just a gorgeous player, just a glorious player. He's one of those who just carries round a kind of geometry set in his head, and he just finds angles for passes, and he's got it. And he should be an absolute star. And when he broke through, and there were people saying that he's as good as Messi, which I don't think was really fair. And he's not quite the dribbler that Messi is. He's more of a passer. But he did score in the last World Cup. But after that, he just seemed to go off the rails, lose motivation. And there was lots of speculation that he was going to give up football for music. Now, thankfully, it seems that's not going to happen, because he's got plenty of time to play football and then devote himself to music afterwards. And he's back in Colombia. And Porto own him, but he's back in loan in Colombia with Medellin, and he's done well there, and his quality just shines. So hopefully he's going to come back. One who kind of effectively gave up the game without officially announcing any retirement was Ronaldinho, wasn't it? Who since 2006 just lived on his name, and was. I remember when he came back to Brazil after a spell with Milan, when he was all right, but he was nowhere near the Ronaldinho of like 2004 to 2006. And when he came back to Brazilian football with Flamengo initially, one who played with him at Barcelona was asked, well, how do you think you'll do? And this fella said, well, it depends on how much sleep he gets. Because sometimes he just gets like 1 hour of sleep, and you can't really be a professional athlete for long on that kind of regime. So unfortunately, without officially announcing his retirement, I think Ronaldinho kind of dined out and lived on his name for about a decade.
You could have thrown in Dion Dublin. And again, it's not about questionable. I think it's too difficult to find questionable professions that people have gone into. But, odd ones, because Dion Dublin went and created like a sort of a drum box called the Dube. And he came in once to Up All Night years ago when we were in London, and he brought in this box and said, yeah, this is what... I thought, what? You've gone from football to creating some musical instrument? I thought it was a little bit surreal, to be frank. But, Mina, OK, let's not talk about dubious professions. And also, don't take it literally like Tim has done, that they've retired from... Sorry, that they've left the game, they've abandoned the game to pursue another career, because what the listener says is that left football, so they may have retired, but it's what they picked up on afterwards that we're interested in. Can you think of anybody that had an unusual profession?
Tim Rice, or I think that's how you pronounce his name.
Oh, Tim Rice, the guy that writes musicals with Andrew Lloyd Webber. I didn't know he was a footballer.
No, Tim Weiss. I don't know how to say it, actually. I'm not very good at German.
Okay.
Do you remember the goalkeeper for the World Cup in 2010? Sorry, yeah, it was 2010. Yeah.
Was it Joseph with his Technicolor Dreamcoat?
Yeah, that's
Werder
the one.
Bremen goalkeeper as well. No, he became a WWE wrestler after. So I thought that was quite cool.
Well, did you not enjoy mine and Tim's jokes? God, you just ignored them, didn't you? How rude can one woman be? After I'd praised you so much. We're throwing in jokes then for you. You didn't even respond to them. Don't worry.
When did you train? You just said to me, can you think of any guy and I answered your question?
But we threw in a couple of... Anyway, let's leave it to one side. They weren't very funny.
The majority of the world's population are too young for our cultural references.
Yeah,
it's a sad truth, but it's one that we have to own up to.
Yeah, we are old
I am very foreign sometimes, so it just seems like I don't get jokes.
You're only foreign sometimes, and the other times you're foreign.
Very fast and totally get everything.
Absolutely. Okay, lots of questions. Let's rattle through some of these.
And there's another guy.
There's another one.
Not Danny Alves, rather. Oh, God, come on, the one at Southampton who... Osvaldo, the record.
Yeah.
Do you remember him?
Yeah.
Who had that bust up with Font, and afterwards at Roma, not afterwards, actually, rather before, he punched a guy for failing to pass him the ball, and then he went to Boca Juniors, and he was, like, sent off, or sorry, basically, like, sacked by the club because he was found, like, smoking in the changing rooms. And then he just talked about football being, like, so utterly ridiculously corrupt. Chievo Verona came in at the time and offered him, like, a huge contract for, like, £2 million a year or something to come back and resurrect his career as a footballer, because he was talented. I used to think he was very, very talented. But he said, no, I just can't bear to be in this kind of industry. I'm off to be, basically a musician. And he sings vocals for a musical band.
Is he any good?
Known in Argentina as Danny Stone. It's all part of their absolute obsession with the Rolling Stones.
Really? Osvaldo's, the only one. I know a couple of guys from Milan that became real estate agents.
Michael wants to know if there are any other managers in your regions who, like Arsene Wenger, have survived so long without... he says challenging for a league title, but I suppose he challenges all the time, but doesn't quite make it, and being happy with just Champions League, minus last weekend, of course, where he didn't manage to get into the the top four. Is there a manager like that? I think the point that they're making is that a manager that has existed for quite a long time without winning any major trophies in your region and survived.
Not the slightest possibility.
Go on then, Tim. What's the nearest then?
Not a hope. Well, just not a hope. It doesn't happen.
How long do they last without? How long do they last generally over your side without?
Very few last 2 years. The cycles here are so short. And if you last 2 years, you usually want to jack it in anyway because you're just mentally jaded. But the Arsene thing is, from a South American perspective, it is unbelievable.
And from a European perspective, Mina?
I mean, let me put it this way. If we're talking about Italians, do I need to mention the likes of Cellino or the Leyton Orient owner or Palermo's Zamparini, these guys used to change once every 3 months, their coaches. If they don't win, they're out, yeah? Same, Spain has a little bit more tact in the sense they might wait a full year, but absolutely not. But also, I mean, with Arsene Wenger, it's a unique story because he did achieve a lot, you know? And so he did sort of revolutionize the club. And I know that it seems like the team is forever paying for something that he did before. And this is nothing akin to what Totti's done at Roma, where we have to spend the rest of our lives thanking him. But
44 minutes. 44 minutes we had to wait for the dig at Totti.
That's not bad. The 44 is not bad.
Well, I was wondering.
Come on, it's not bad.
Because you won't be able to do this next year. It's now or never. You know.
Exactly.
No, the guy is not going to give up, I'm telling you. He's going to do a U-turn. Tomorrow is supposed to be his last game. By the way, I just also always want to do a disclaimer in which I think he is probably the best number 10 we've had in Italy. I even think he's better than Del Piero.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I just... it's kind of that thing where you feel guilty, and I think that that's sort of a little thing with Arsenal, where it's like they feel guilty sacking. Obviously, Leicester felt no such guilt when they sacked Ranieri, but it's kind of like, oh, you've done so much for us, and we're just going to keep you for the rest of our lives, you know? But it's also different budgets, right? Like, there are coaches that have lasted simply because their teams don't have the ambition of going further, and they know themselves to be a team that sells consistently and therefore can't do much about it. But Arsenal really think of themselves as being, you know, a team that can always challenge for honours, and rightly so. So that's when you all of a sudden look at Wenger and think totally underachieving.
And just the point that Mina made about, look, this is a unique situation because Wenger had a track record and was successful for many years. Does that count for nothing in South America then, Tim?
Well, I also think with Arsenal, it's a different case because you've got the transition of the stadium as well, which was quite high risk, I suppose, from a business point of view, and he's managed to kind of manage that. That transition, and perhaps Arsenal is a club which is being run a bit like a business, you know. And remember
exactly.
that the objective of a business is not football is such a strange business because the objective is not profit. The objective is titles, usually. But it seems to me that the people who run Arsenal, they're at least as interested in the business side as they are in the glory side. So it seems to me that the criteria by which Wenger is being judged is different from the criteria which is usually used in football.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, lots of questions. Lots and lots of questions. Jean Edinburgh wants to know, what's the Colonel's take on Juventus as the Champions League final looms?
Oh, God, I'm really superstitious about talking about this. Okay, what do I think? They're serial chokers, right? I mean, this is going to be their 9th final. They've only won it twice. So this is the team that loves to reach the final and very good at it. They reached, 3 in a row in the 90s, managed to win 1 through penalties against, again, Ajax. So I really, it looks like I'm having quite a dig at Ajax. I'm not. But they're a side that just, I don't know what happens to them when they get to the final, but it just seems like it's been there historically. They just tend to fall apart. This is, many are saying, the best Juventus we've ever seen. I disagree, but apparently it is, just because of everything they've achieved. 6 years in a row they've won the title. 3rd year in a row they've won the Coppa Italia, and it's a record on both. So 2nd season in 3, where they challenged for the treble and reached the final of the Champions League. They are a better balanced side than Real Madrid is. They have defensive mind and boast defensive brilliance as well. I think they're still missing that extra gear in attack, but it's good enough. The thing is, right, is that play them against any team, and I would probably tell you that Juventus would come out as winners. The thing with Real Madrid is that they are probably the most unpredictable side in Europe. You have no idea whether they're going to lose 4-0 because their defense will capitulate, or whether they'll lose 4-0, win 5-4 because, they can always score a goal. or whether they'll keep it tight and win 1-0. They're a side that you just don't know what happens to them, because sometimes they can play astonishingly good football, moving around really well, and Ronaldo is peaking at just the right time because he's actually been rested this season. Or whether, they embarrass themselves or don't do very well, or start to struggle against a side that knows how to defend. It's about mental fortitude, and we know that when it comes to the Champions League, this is Real Madrid's ground. They know it very well. They feel very experienced, and it's a competition that they love even more than their own league. When it comes to Juventus, there's going to be nerves. Not every single player in that side has played in a final, and there is a little bit of an experience there. But if there was ever going to be a Juventus side that won the cup, then really this should be it, because I don't know what's missing. And if they don't do it this year, then I don't know when it's going to happen.
Which one of us has upset Lisa in Birmingham? Who do you think it is that's upset her?
Me?
Tim, who do you think it is?
Well, I've tried hard not to do any.
I know you've tried.
Upsetting.
I know you've tried. Look,
So, but I think I'm innocent on this occasion.
actually, if you
Although I do have 250 other offences to be taken into consideration, Your
yeah,
Honour.
especially the ones in the black country accent. Do you fancy doing it now so that you can upset her some more?
No, peace and love, peace
Go
and
on,
love.
yeah. Let me give you a clue. She's an Arsenal fan, I think.
Oh. Then we all upset her.
What do you mean we all? Why are you including me in this?
Well, because you
Collective,
read out
yeah.
that story
Team
about
effort.
what we should
Team
call...
effort.
Because
Yeah,
I did
Take
what?
one for the team, because you read out that question about what we should call other teams,
I'm not taking one for the team. I actually avoided reading out what the abbreviation of Arsenal would be.
You sniggered. You sniggered, and we all heard it.
Of course, it was funny. It was funny, wasn't it?
See,
What am I
you're
supposed to
laughing at
do?
their expense. You're laughing at their expense.
Oh, come on, Tim, don't go there. Not tonight, please. Not tonight. You've already upset Lisa.
Chaz and Dave.
Actually,
On the eve of the FA Cup final.
yeah,
Oh, so it
I
is
know.
Tim.
It is
So
Tim.
it is Tim who
It's
upset
always
her.
Tim. Actually, it was me who upset her, because apparently I said, I can't even believe it was a senior moment, Lisa, apologies. I said, and she says, Dawson, Arsenal not winning any major trophies. We won the FA Cup back to back for winning 3 in 4 years. Yeah, okay, very done. Yeah. So
Oh.
apologies. Yeah, it was me.
You see, I'm European. I don't count the FA Cup.
She's a foreigner, folks. 08085 909 693. Would you like to remind her which way we voted at the last referendum? 08085 909 693.
But don't you regret that decision now?
I'm not saying anything about that. Trust me. I'm not saying. Okay, lots of questions still to come as well. You've been so naughty tonight. Where am I going to go with this? Okay. Yeah, let's try and restore some order into the conversation. And quite a few people have been asking about that young kid that's been signed by Real Madrid, by the way. And there's been a couple of other questions about the FA Cup, indeed. And does it play out in either of your regions? Does it get a mention at all? South America, first of all?
Oh yeah, it'll be on TV over here, and they do love the tradition of it. And remember back in '81 when Ardiles and Ricardo Villa played it. It played big there, and that the idea of a trophy which has been played for continually since, was it 1872?
Yeah.
That really has an air of grandeur. Most of the countries here, they now have cup competitions. In most cases, they're relatively new, these national cup competitions, or they've lapsed and been brought back. And obviously, as they're new, they don't have anything like the tradition of the FA Cup. My favourite of the cup competitions over here is the Peruvian one, the Peruvian Cup, because there's 2 national professional divisions in Peru, and the Peruvian Cup is for all the teams that are outside those top two divisions. So it starts with really picturesque scenes, games where the game gets interrupted because a herd of cows run onto the pitch and stuff like that. But it boils down to a final where the winners go straight into the first division and the losers go straight into the second division. So there really is something at stake there with that final, and it's something which does help to decentralise a footballing culture which historically is very, very focused on the capital city of Lima. So that I think is an interesting concept in a cup competition, but no one really has anything with quite that same tradition of the FA Cup.
And what about in Europe?
Well, Spain is doing, like, in the newspapers online are doing minute by minute about it, and there's been a lot of coverage because, you know, I think more than anything, this particular one's quite interesting to them because it's they're all interested to see how the Wenger saga is gonna ride out, whether or not he's gonna manage to win it, so that everyone sort of forgives him for a season and not finishing in the top four or not. That storyline is proved to be quite big in the likes of Spain. And Italy is obviously going to be very interested because of the fact that it's Antonio Conte, and they want to know how well, or they're very, of course, they've owned the storyline. They've like, oh, one of our own, and the Italian tacticians, they always do so well abroad. And everyone talked about Mourinho and Guardiola, but it was ours who made the difference. And watch him perhaps defeat Arsenal and perhaps get rid of Wenger at the helm. So that storyline, again, very it dominates everything. So it does get a lot of coverage in the same way that, you know, Italy is not going to cover the Coppa del Re with as much interest, and vice versa. They're not going to cover the Coppa Italia, which already happened, with as much interest. But FA Cup, they know, means a lot. It's not considered how it is in Europe. They don't really care about those League Cups as much. But the FA Cup is something special because of how the English treat it, how much they love it, the coverage shown. So they kind of have to get on board just for advertising reasons more than anything.
Yeah, this is from the Norwegian Wood, as he describes himself, Tim, who's thanking you very much for your suggestion for him to choose Medellin for his 2-month stay in Colombia. He says it's an absolutely amazing city that he highly recommends. Interestingly enough, he says he bumped into Carlos Valderrama and his wife at Schiphol Airport. And he's got a photograph. I'm looking at the photograph now. There's a selfie.
Is his wife in the photo?
No, his wife's not in the photo.
Because the great thing about Carlos Valderrama's wife is that she has the same hair.
Well, yeah.
He scoured the world for someone with the same hair.
He has still got the same hair.
Amazing.
He has still got the same hair. So, and I mean, the joke about this email is that Marius, the Norwegian Wood, says, I'm the one on the left. Yeah, like we couldn't tell.
Can you ask him to tweet it?
Anyway, well, yeah, I'll tweet it. I'll retweet it later on. So you'll get. In fact, Marius, if you're listening, you tweet it as well. Make sure you stick my handle on it and Mina's handle on it and Tim's, and we'll try and send that around as well. But this is a question because he bumps into Carlos Valderrama, as you do, with his wife. As you do. So Carlos Valderrama has probably said to his missus, look, you know, you go and do whatever you're going to do. I'm going to take this selfie with this bloke that I don't even know. And the bloke that he doesn't even know didn't even ask Carlos Valderrama, what are you doing nowadays, Carlos? So he wants you to answer that one, Tim.
He does. He kind of wanders around doing publicity work, living off his name really, and saying "todo bien" a lot. You know, all right, which is his kind of catchphrase.
What does he say that in Spanish, or is he saying it like Chaz and Dave? Or I should say mud. I should say mud, shouldn't I? I should say mud. Yeah, I should have said tiger.
No, we'll lose Mina forever.
Okay, yeah. Okay,
I'm already lost.
Stick to Carlos Valderrama then.
I'm a little bit disappointed that he didn't go into coaching because I just think he got a lot to. He had a lot to give. And when you mentioned earlier on. Danny Rose talking about the difficulty of playing against Bernardo Silva. It reminded me so much of Graham Lasso talking about the first time I think the only time he played against Valderrama in a friendly for England against Colombia. And he had the idea beforehand of Valderrama being a luxury player. And then he realised, you know, when you're up against him, you never get near him because there was such a paradox with Valderrama's game. He always had the ball, but he never had the ball. You know, he's got it. You try and close him down, and it's already gone.
He's a magician.
Yeah, and then he's just moved subtly so he can receive it again. You got to close it down, and it's already gone. You know, and someone with that cerebral approach to football. I'm a bit disappointed that he hasn't really put himself on the line and got out there as a coach, because I think he's someone who would have so much to offer.
Why do you think he never did that? Because he was such a conductor on the pitch. You know, the conductors are the ones that.
It's a hard life. It's a hard life to be a coach.
Why would you want to? If you don't have to do it, why would you want to do it?
Because it's in your blood.
Especially as in South America, you just don't have that job security. Why would you want to put yourself on the line like that?
It's in your blood. Why do footballers do it? Because
they value their life.
yeah, I suppose so. Second half of the World Football phone-in, 08085 909 693 is the number to go if you'd like to join in. If you've got a question on football in either region, or indeed on the regions themselves, for the Colonel, Mina Rizuki, who takes care of any questions you have on Europe and players from over there playing in our leagues, and the Legendino, Tim Vickery, will take care of any questions you've got on South American footy and players from over there playing in our leagues as well. A couple of texts to remind us about footballers who went on to professions that you might be surprised at. Did you know that Ray Wilson, the 1966 World Cup winner, became...
Undertaker.
Yeah. A real Undertaker. Yeah, not a wrestler for, World Wrestling Federation, but a real Undertaker, yeah, when he retired. That's Jim at different times, obviously, in those days. How much did they get paid for winning the World Cup in those days, Tim? Do you remember? It was like Tupper's Halfpenny, wasn't it?
Yeah, maybe a car. Did they get a car out of it?
Did they get a car out of it?
Perhaps.
Are you sure they got a car? I'm not even sure about that.
No, I'm not. No.
Yeah, I think it was like 30 quid or something like that. And,
I know we didn't have a car, because my old man had one of those like Beetle cars. Not a Beetle, bubble cars. That's what they're called, bubble cars.
Oh, they were nice, though, weren't they?
Yeah, but he had to sell it when I came along. That was a big problem in our relationship. He thought he made the wrong choice. Got rid of his car in order to have me. Was a problem with us.
I had a mate like that who had, he was like a Hell's Angels. Yeah, he had an old chopper. He kept on going on. I never ever saw it, but I know the colour, because he was going. It was baby blue, Don, baby blue chopper. That's all I knew about it. There was baby blue, and then he met a girl who was into horses, and she managed to convince him to sell his chopper for a horse. And the joke about it, this is a true story. And this was in Sweden, and this was my flatmate, my closest friend, and we played in a band together and all of this. Anyway, he sold his chopper for the horse, and of course the relationship ended. So he was stuck with a horse, and he was trying to sell it. For ages he was trying to sell it because it was costing him money. And this family said that, they wanted to test the horse out to make sure that it was suitable for their daughter. And, he drove the horse there and everything. And then he couldn't remember where this house was, this farm was, or wherever they left the horse. And one day we were on tour, in a tour bus in Sweden. I can't remember. We were coming from somewhere in the south of Sweden. We passed some town. He saw the name and he was like, this is the place where my horse is. And he wanted us to divert to go and get a horse. Unfortunately for him, the tour bus couldn't accommodate a horse. That's a true story anyway. Just thought I'd throw that in there for no apparent reason. Anyway, also Northern Ireland's Phil Mulreen used to play for Norwich City and briefly for Man United, is now a priest, says Pete in Monkstown. And there are a couple of other footballers that I can think of. Do you remember Gavin Peacock, who used to play for Chelsea? Because he went into a seminary. Yeah. He went into a seminary. And one of our own, so to speak, Richard Rufus of Charlton Athletic defender, went into a seminary as well, became a priest as well. So that's not unusual in terms of footballers turning to religion. And you mentioned Peter Knowles earlier, amongst others. Anyway, let's get on with this. Although, hang on a second. Do you remember last week, Tim, I was introducing you to our youngster over here, our newcomer, our new signing, and you started singing "He's one of our own, he's one of our own." Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mitch, you remember that?
I do.
He's brought in some biscuits today. You know what I'm like with biscuits, and he hasn't even offered me a single one, not one.
Disgraceful.
Isn't it terrible? Remember, after all I did for him, do you remember how I taught him everything I knew about journalism last week?
And you were a growing lad.
Yeah, well, growing. You're not growing fast enough, apparently. Oh, he's coming in with the biscuits now, is he? Come on, Mitch, come on. This is a bit... Oh, the chocolate. OK, I'll forgive you because it's got chocolate on top of them as everything. Is it only one, or can I take two? Can I take a second one?
How many do you need?
Well, I need the whole pack, actually. No, don't be silly. No, you can have one.
Thank you.
How many more do you need?
They're all yours, Dotton.
No, you take them. Go on, I'll take the second one. Go on, you take the rest of them. Actually, I'll take a third one. Yeah, you take the rest. Actually, I'll take a fourth.
Oh.
No, go on, you take the rest. I can't have any more, but thanks.
Save them for later. We've got an hour to go yet.
This is World Football Phoning, you know. Have you got a question? Because you're trying to get a Brazilian shirt name, aren't you?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, well, no, just to Mina this time, actually.
Just to Mina?
Yeah, because Mina's been the only polite guest tonight. Tim hasn't been polite at all. He hasn't even asked how you are. He never asked how I am. He hasn't asked how you are either.
Typical.
Oh, typical, isn't it?
You wouldn't have got that from the Springbokker Junior.
And you wouldn't have got that from the Colonel either. She's so polite. She said, how are you? You know, how are you? Don't you, Mina? Well, she's not here now.
Mina's not getting a biscuit.
Oh, Mina? It's nice biscuit.
Is there anything as rude as stonewall silence, being blank?
Oh,
I'm so,
that's
by
rude.
the way,
Oh,
I did it again. I put you guys on mute. For the longest time, I was wondering why no one was responding to me. And I started to feel like I was getting blanked.
How do you put us on mute out of interest?
I basically mute my microphone because I have these like chocolate-covered almonds that I keep eating. And every time I put one in my
exactly what I
mouth,
mean.
I basically mute myself.
I know exactly what you mean about eating whilst you're on air. Oh, well, we've got
We
young...
can talk together now.
we got... and of course, Franny Lee started the toilet roll business, but that's neither here nor there. Have you got a question for Tim or for Mina? For Tim?
I have, if you don't mind. I think I worked out what's going on here. You've invited me in to ask some questions while you can have my biscuits. Yeah. Okay. Well, good job. I've got a couple of questions. I'll start with one for Tim, if that's okay. Tim, here on Up All Night on 5 Live, we've been...
He's having a drink.
Oh, sorry, that's me.
Mina.
Having like a tea party.
Mina, everybody heard that. I had to say, are you having a drink? Because I just mentioned...
It is a drink.
I just mentioned Francis Lee and the toilet roll. And then it could have sounded like... I had to say that.
It's a jug of water, okay?
I'm
Calm
glad
down.
to hear that. Glad to hear that. Anyway,
I'm still a lady.
of course you are.
Without further interruptions, Tim, we've been covering here on Up All Night the current political crisis in Brazil with the President Michel Temer. My question is, are there any clubs in Brazil strongly associated with any political or protest movement? For example, historically, Barcelona associated with the Catalan political uprising back in the day. You've also got clubs in Germany like St. Pauli, to a lesser extent Dortmund,
Somebody's
associated
mentioned that
with the
tonight,
left wing. Is there any club in Brazil associated, not necessarily with this particular protest movement, but any kind of social or political movement?
And if I can just add, I'm going to come on to that because Ryan in Arkansas has asked a very similar question aimed at you, Mina. He says, I know clubs like St. Pauli in Germany have a strong leftist fan presence, and the Italian club Lazio has been associated with the ultra-right. I wonder if your guests can think of any clubs in their regions with strong political leanings and explain how they came about. So, Tim, first of all, we'll come on to you in a moment, Mina.
I think the specific political leanings are stronger in Europe than they are in South America. A lot of South American clubs stand for, these days I think in a very symbolic way, stand for the mass of the people or the elite, even if sociologically that's not borne out by a study of their fan base. But it tends to be a symbolic thing rather than a practical political thing. You get moments, I mean, Corinthians in São Paulo, the giant Corinthians, are very, very associated with a movement kind of led by Socrates in the early 80s when Brazil was still a military dictatorship, but the dictatorship was weakening and kind of on the way out. Corinthians are associated with a pro-democracy movement. They had a thing there called Corinthians Democracy where the players were voting on everything, which was a very subversive message which was going out to society on the value of voting. But that was a particular moment rather than something which is embedded in the club's DNA. I suppose on Botafogo here in Rio have a kind of left wing bent in their supporters, and I was at a game of theirs just a couple of days after this current crisis with President Temer erupted, and they won the game, which meant that they qualified for the knockout stages of the Libertadores, which that's a great achievement for a club who this time last year were being seen as relegation candidates. So they had plenty to celebrate, and their great rivals Flamengo had just been knocked out of the Libertadores in humiliating style just 24 hours earlier. But when the train from the stadium got back into the main station in the centre of Rio, when the fans got out onto the platform, you're expecting them to all start singing about the victory and Flamengo's elimination, and instead of that, there were just cries up and down the platform of Temer out, get the president out. And it's hard to think of too many clubs where that would have happened. But Botafogo, their main association is with the boom bossa nova years in the 50s and 60s. They've got quite an urban, quite middle-class support base in many cases, but it does tend to have that kind of left-wing bent a little bit. Although, I think Mina will have some far stronger stories in Europe about
just
strict
before that,
political
of course,
connections.
Them lot that we used to call Man U, that we can no longer call Man U because it's disrespectful. When they won the 1968 European Cup, their fans were singing Wilson out. Wilson, for those youngsters in the room, was the Prime Minister at the time, Harold Wilson. So they were singing. Did you know that, Mitch?
Well, I've just read Andrew Marr's History of Modern Britain. Test me. Actually, no, that didn't go well last time. Let's not test me.
No. You've just put me to shame there. I haven't even read that. Anyway, Harold Wilson was Prime Minister at the time. They were shouting, Wilson out, Busby in. Matt Busby was the manager of Man United at that time. You didn't know that, did you?
I knew that.
Okay, he knows his history, this boy. So they were singing, Wilson out, Busby in, hallelujah. Wilson out, Busby in, hallelujah. Did you know that, Paul, our resident Man United fan in the house, our studio director? He wasn't listening as usual. So, Mina, you carry on. You tell us about these right-wing Lazios and everybody else over your side.
Well, I think with Lazio, it's really kind of well known, and we know that they've been associated to fascist and their political leanings. But a lot of them now are quite apologetic when you talk about it. Strangely enough, they're still no, actually, that's not true anymore. I would say that there are different reasons for fearing Napoli supporters, but they are once upon a time extreme right-wing fanatics, and they used to wave like neo-Nazi banners, and they were known to be just a hideous, despicable side with all these political leanings. But you often found a lot of them outside of Rome would be very apologetic for the way that they are. They used to say, we support Lazio. As a baby, I actually used to support Lazio. I didn't understand anything to do with the political connotations. I just really liked Pierluigi Casiraghi on a totally female level. I just fancied him. So that's kind of why I like Lazio.
It happens.
And it took a whole 6 months before I jumped ship and became a Juventus fan.
Can I tell a Casiraghi story?
Of course, yeah.
I was back briefly during Euro '86, hosted in England, and Italy went out in the first round. And I was in a bar watching Italy's decisive game. I think they drew it. Did they drew 0-0 with Germany? They had to win in it to stay in the competition, and they only drew the last game. And I was watching it with a mate of mine who had lived in Italy. And right at the end, who should miss the clearest possible chance to put Italy into the next round? Mina's youthful idol there, Casiraghi, and my mate who had lived in Italy, he just came all over Italian for a minute, and he just yelled out, "Vai jogar com le signorini, Casiraghi. Vai pra casa, Casiraghi," which like go home, Casiraghi, and go and play with the women. Which was very prejudiced, but I couldn't believe I was hearing this coming out of someone who was born and bred in Accrington.
That is funny. However, we've had one text here from Catherine in Ceredigion, and I think this one's for you, Mitch. Yeah? I think this one's for you. It says, look, I'm suffering from a rather early bout of morning sickness, and I do apologise, Catherine. There's nothing I could do with these youngsters. Anyway, she says, I'm suffering from a rather early bout of morning sickness. Can you ask... it says Dotson & Co. No, just the Co, if you don't mind. not to eat and drink quite so audibly, please. Oh, the drinking was meaner, though. I'm sorry.
That was me.
Anyway, it's literally more than I can stomach. So Mina takes the drinking, and Mitch, you take because you were munching on those biscuits a moment ago. People may not have heard it, but I heard it quite distinctly.
I think there is a webcam. Guilty as charged.
You are charged. And you've now got 2 questions into the World Football Phone-In over the course of 2 weeks. How many questions more does he need, Tim, before he can be even considered for a Brazilian shirt name?
Oh,
Do we have suggestions for this name?
Well, of course, we've got to do it to him. Otherwise Sean Wheelock, the big wheel, won't be happy.
I think he's halfway there, sure.
He's not halfway there. Come on. No. He's got another 9 months or so before he's going.
Oh my God! Talk about torture.
I know.
If he's giving you biscuits at the top of
we don't give them away. We don't give them away. Although somebody suggested here,
you were throwing mine away.
Well, yours seem to emerge. Naturally,
Yeah. Thanks for that, Tim.
No, you're welcome. Figroleo, Mitch. Somebody suggested Figroleo should be a shirt name for you.
Beats me.
It beats me as well. Figroleo.
Ah.
Do you get it? It's a biscuit.
Just about.
Yeah. Okay.
But the biscuits are for you, Dutton. They're not for me.
I know, but I'm
merely the biscuit provider.
I've already got my Brazilian shirt name. It's something like Bisquito, I think, which is like mosquito, but a lot tastier. Anyway, let's get back onto the World Football Phone-In. Mitch, thanks very much. So another 9 months of questions to go. You might be considered for a Brazilian shirt name.
Look forward to it. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Martin in Colorado Springs says, with so much turmoil of late, I'd like to point out that in Germany there are some fan friendships between clubs where one football club's supporters will back the others for various reasons, many going back decades. For instance, I support second division Karlsruhe SC, and we travel to much despised Stuttgart or other teams in our region to sit in the away section with Bundesliga side Hertha Berlin fans, basically to boost their numbers and cheer against Stuttgart as part of our fan alliance. And we hate Stuttgart, ha ha. Do these type of club or fan friendships happen in our respective experts' regions? We always hear about the fans' rivalries, but what about fan friendships, Tim?
Yeah, I've heard of one strong one, though how strong this one still is, I don't know. That's Vasco and Palmeiras. Vasco in Rio and Palmeiras in São Paulo. Quite where this comes from historically, I don't know, although I suspect that what they share, because I think you do need an anti-thing to bring people together, like our friends there telling us with Stuttgart. Now, Vasco kind of defined themselves against the Rio Giants, who are Flamengo, and Palmeiras, who are the club of the Italian community in São Paulo, could define themselves a little bit against Corinthians. So they're both always trying to get out of the shadow of the giant clubs, and maybe that's something which brings them together.
And Mina, in Europe?
They used to have that. There used to be, teams that were linked to one another. There was just a special, love relationship that happened. You've got things where certain presidents are actually supportive of. We have one such actual example. I think it's Sassuolo's president is a Milan fan. And when Milan come and play, he cheers them on. But that's not really a club friendship, if that makes sense. I mean, Espanyol, who are the other Catalan side in Italy, if the name suggests Espanyol means that they have different political meanings than Barcelona. And they've always had a somewhat of a special relationship with Real Madrid. I don't remember now which season it was. I want to say, not obviously this league, not the one before, but the one before that, they helped Real Madrid win by defeating Barcelona in the last match of the season. And they've always had a relationship with them, somewhat similar ideas on things. And that's perhaps why I think Pochettino will end up in Real Madrid. No, not really because of that.
Well,
but anyway.
there have been a couple of questions in that vein, but I'm glad you've answered it, so I don't need to go down there. Yeah.
Well, he'll definitely never take Barcelona. We know that much. So, and I know that Real Madrid absolutely love him. I just wonder whether he's going to go there or whether he's going to go to PSG, where his heart belongs.
Although Tottenham are kind of a feeder club for Real Madrid, aren't they? Given nowadays, Modric and Bale. Yeah, exactly.
Imagine providing coaches too.
Yeah, Nick in Bexley Heath says, given the week's terrible events, in the UK. He wants to strike a positive note tonight on the phone. He says, I was lucky enough to take in a match at Lyon's new stadium last weekend, and it was the antithesis of the kind of soulless corporate experiences that new stadia can be nowadays. My question for the panellists is, when did a footballing experience unexpectedly lift your soul and remind you why we love the game? And adds, don't look back in anger. Mina, do you want to take that first?
I mean, to love the game, no, but I have a special, I don't know if you remember this, the Europa League, I think actually everyone remembers this, Juventus Fulham.
Yeah.
Okay, so they were thrashed by Fulham in the Europa League, and obviously Fulham that year had, with Roy Hodgson, reached the final. And Juventus were obviously up and have gone back to being a side. I am their fan, obviously. And they were, a top-level club, so it was quite humiliating to watch them getting thrashed in the Europa League. They by a side that no one had reckoned even had a chance to do something special. And I remember being in Craven Cottage, and I was behind the goal, and I was with a bunch of Fulham supporters. And obviously, I tried really hard to stay neutral and not celebrate or not cry as the goals went down. And in the end, it just was very obvious. And they were just so lovely, the Fulham fans. They stood up. They applauded Juventus, they hugged me, they offered me drinks, and I just remember thinking that I've never been to a team, to a stadium where the opponents have dealt with another side so well and with their opposing fans so well. And for me, that was probably why Craven Cottage is my favourite stadium in England, and why I absolutely love their fans.
Tim?
Well, I think it has to be back to the city of Medellin, Atlético Nacional, the way that they responded after that the Chapecoense air disaster, when the Chapecoense were going up to play Atlético Nacional in Medellin, and when the game should have happened, Atlético Nacional threw open their stadium, and they had a packed stadium there with thousands outside, having a really moving memorial service for people who the only connection was a game which hadn't taken place. It doesn't really surprise me that much, knowing how great people can be in Medellin. A few months ago, just a couple of months ago, Botafogo played there. And that kind of Colombian-Brazilian connection. As the Botafogo fans came into the stadium, they were warmly applauded by the Atlético Nacional fans already in the ground. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. All of this for me is just a dramatic symbol of that silent power of football to forge international friendships that I don't think we talk about enough.
Richard the Milkman informs me that the World Cup winners, the English World Cup winners in 1966, were given a car each. Do you want to hazard a guess as to what car it would be? Because Mina's not going to have a clue.
A Beetle.
Beetle, that's not a bad guess.
Well, it's a bit German, isn't it? Given that they just...
I didn't want to say that.
Okay, fine.
No,
Vauxhall.
She's gone for a Beetle.
Give him a Mini.
Mini,
give him an Italian job, Mini.
Yeah, a Mini's a good shout. It was a Ford car.
I was about to say Ford
Cortina?
Fiesta.
Cortina's the one. Which Ford Cortina? Which mark?
I don't know. As a non-driver, I'm not very good at that.
Okay, a Ford Cortina Mark II 1600 GT. By the time I was...
Stains on the seat in the back, of course.
Don't know what you're talking about, mate. So,
Saturday's Kids, the jam.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Ian Dury.
Drive Cortina for trim dashboard, stains on the seat in the back, of course.
I was thinking I had a love affair with Tina in the back of my Cortina. A season up, could not be more obscene. Anyway, let's leave that to one side. That's just lyrics of the song is what I can say. Johnny in South Boston says, I'm a big baseball and American football fan. Go Pats. One of the best parts of going to an MLB game or American football game is pre-gaming at local pubs or tailgating. What football ground in your region has the best pre-game bar stroke tailgate scene? Let's stick to the bar scene because the tailgate, I'm presuming, is a uniquely American phenomenon.
I don't even know what that is. What is it?
Do you know they have these sort of pickup trucks? Basically, they open up their boot, essentially. So they'll have, a picnic from the boot of a car. It's a boot picnic, essentially. And everybody parks in a car park and they sit and have drinks or hamburgers or hot dogs or hotchy doggies or whatever it be before the game. And thousands and thousands and thousands of fans do this all together. Anyway, let's talk about pre-game bar or some kind of pre-game communal experience before the match.
There's a big problem asking this question to journos because unfortunately,
we don't get to do that.
This is
you're in the stadium early.
And you just cut off from that experience, and it's something. There's a side of me that really misses that.
But you would know about it though. It's like each time I pass, the Gooners ground, whatever they call it nowadays. You can see that the pubs are packed out before the game, and people standing on the pavement and having a drink. That's whereas when I go up your side to the other side of North London, they're outside the chip shop. You get me?
Yeah, well, kebab shops, isn't it? Usually.
Well,
down
nowadays
down the high road.
It's Little Cyprus, isn't it? Yeah. But those are pre-match rituals. You could say. You could argue.
There's a good one, I think. And the stadium that Botafogo use, which is not a great stadium, it was built for the 2007 Pan American Games, so it's got a running track around the outside, which makes it a bad football stadium. But there is a kicking atmosphere outside the stadium before. I know this because I have to walk, from the train station. You've got to walk right round to the other side, and there's a lot of drinking going on, and there's a really nice environment, I think, in that ground. It's not ideal. It's a little bit cramped. They did it up for the Olympics, so that they've smartened it up a little bit. But I always see lots of Botafogo fans enjoying themselves around that one.
And anybody over your side have pre-match rituals?
I was going to say there is which I always wanted personally, but I wanted it in my bedroom. It's like St. Pauli have this little train in the VIP section, and basically.
I thought you were going to say Kaziragi again. in your bedroom.
Fair enough.
Well, that wouldn't be bad. Anyway, what I was going to say is. Really hope no one's listening to this podcast. So it's a train that runs every few minutes or so, and it has sausages and drinks, and it's like a conveyor belt where you take what you want and you eat while you're watching the action, and that's really cool.
It's like a Japanese thing. When you go to those Japanese sushi restaurants, they do that. Okay, hold your thoughts, guys, because we've got the latest 5 Live headlines now with Lisa McCormick. Yeah, if you do like to take the time to join us before 4 o'clock on our World Football Phone this morning, Europe and South America, and players from over there playing in our leagues with the Colonel, Mina Rizuki, and the Legendino, Tim Vickery. The number to call is 0808 590 9693. Lots of questions for you guys. You remember when you said that you are a lady, Mina? Mm-hmm. Well, Richard in Oxford has said...
Oh, God.
Hey, don't get worried. Richard in Oxford has said, "Morning, guys and lady." I just wanted to ask, what's going on with that Argentina head coach? Or going on with Argentina head coaches? Or that Argentina head coach's job, more precisely?
Yeah.
Well, it's Jorge Sampaoli.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's called up the squad. For Argentina, have got a couple of friendlies coming up in Australia and Singapore against Brazil and Singapore, respectively. But he's called up a squad, but he hasn't. Why hasn't he? Because he's not yet Argentina's coach. He's still the coach of Sevilla. And so legally, he can't really do this. So the Argentine FA said, no, it's Juan Sebastian Veron, who's the new coordinator of national teams, who actually called up the team. It wasn't. It was Sampaoli. But they have to sort out his separation, his severance from his job with Sevilla. He's under contract with Sevilla. And Sampaoli got roundly booed by the home crowd there at Sevilla on the last day of the Spanish season, who were disgusted with him for being in the job a year and then walking out to manage his national team. Sampaoli is now flown back to Buenos Aires, and so they just have to move towards a legal understanding in compensation. And the Argentine FA are broke, which doesn't make it easy. So I think the kind of compensation money that the Argentine FA will have to pay will have to be staggered over a fair few months. But it's going to be Sampaoli, which will be absolutely fascinating. But we still got to sort out the legal niceties.
Out of curiosity, how much did Messi have a say in this?
Don't know. It's a difficult one. I mean, Sampaoli said that he really wanted the experience of coaching Messi. And remember, at the time when they sacked the previous coach, Edgardo Bauza, Messi was at that point suspended for the next 3 World Cup qualifiers, meaning that at that point the new coach had the immediate priority, with Argentina struggling to qualify, of building a team without Messi, and also, assuming that they qualify, trying to build a team with Messi. And Argentina really, even though they've reached 3 finals in the last 3 years and lost them all, kind of Juventus style, sorry Mina, they haven't really been a consistent... That was low, I'm sorry. That was meaner than Mina. I don't think they've really been a consistent side. I don't think they've looked like a real team in the fullness of the word for a decade now, and it's going to be. Well, it's unbalanced because the defensive unit, Sergio Romero in goal, who's a reserve, has been a reserve wherever he's been. Zabaleta at right back, who's now clearly on the way down. The centre back combination is Otamendi and Funes Mori. Well, I'm not a big fan. I'm a bigger fan of Otamendi than I am of Funes Mori, but I don't think either of them are great. Left back Marcus Rojo. It's not a great defensive unit, and it's such an unbalanced side. And football, the ankle bone is connected to the neck bone, and sometimes they've just been over recent years so dependent on individual flashes of genius. I mean, their retrospective, their record in this World Cup qualification campaign is just absurd. I mean, Messi's only played 6 times and they've won 5 of them. The 8 times that they played without Messi, they've only won 1. It's utter, total Messi dependence, and it's been Mascherano dependence as well. Although I think he's now on the way down. Interestingly, that in this squad, Mascherano's been named as a defender, so that's a change. It's going to be fascinating to see how Sampaoli constructs this team, who will want to play in the opponent's half of the field. With a fairly sluggish defensive unit. That's the area of the team that I think will suffer most modifications.
So basically what you're saying is defence wins you championships.
Yeah, well, I think it's true. No side wins championships if it gives away stupid goals.
Wasn't it you that was tweeting this week, Tim, about Brazilian defensive midfielders, or was it attacking midfielders or attacking defenders?
No, fullbacks.
Oh, right, fullbacks.
Fullbacks, because there is a chance that we'll get. So if Carvajal isn't fit, there's a chance that we'll get 4 Brazilian fullbacks in the Champions League final, which is a remarkable tribute to a wonderful tradition.
I'm not sure you can say that.
Well, I just did.
What I mean to say is, if Carvajal comes back, it would be a huge blessing, because the alternative is a disaster.
Oh, sure.
But
Carvajal is having a great season, and is much better than Danilo. But even so, even if Carvajal plays, you've still got 3. Marcelo, who's had the best year in his 10th decade at Real Madrid. Daniel Alves, who everyone thought was finished when he left Barcelona, how they've missed him. And Alexandru, who's very, very good. I remember talking on this programme about Alexandru when he was a reserve at Santos, saying, watch out for him, because I think this one can go all the way. Oh, yes.
Yeah, but he has these flashes that are so irritating, where he just completely forgets what he's supposed to do.
Agreed.
Sorry.
Agreed.
Oh, right, okay.
But he also has the lot.
And I feel like Khedira is the one who always needs to clean up after him. And that's why, I don't know if you remember, he got the yellow card, which meant that he had to miss the first match against Monaco. But sometimes you just feel like, where did you disappear? Like, come back, But Dani Alves, wow, what a player.
Did Tim pay you to put the ball on the penalty spot for him several times in this conversation, Mina?
Every time.
Yeah, like when you say...
I'm a rich woman because of this.
Yeah, I'm sure you are, because like when you say, you can't say that, and then we left the pregnant pause, and then Tim goes, well, I just did. It makes it easy for him. I think he should work harder. What
It's like when people say you can't say fairer than that. Well, you just did.
Yeah. Mike,
You clearly can say it.
Mike in Bradford says, what do you think about the chances of Antoine Griezmann joining Manchester United? This is an evergreen, isn't it, for you, Mina?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to. It's tough because according to Atletico Madrid, nope, there's absolutely no way. They can't see it happening. He's going to stay with them, you know. I don't think he has yet made his decision. I do think that before, obviously, they played the Europa League final, there was talk of him wanting to see whether or not they get into the Champions League, and then perhaps the chances of him joining would be higher. So now they won it, they're in the Champions League, and yet it still seems like we're nowhere near sort of finding a resolution as to whether or not he wants to go. Now, interestingly enough, obviously Diego Simeone has committed his future to Atletico Madrid. He really feels there's something there to build upon, and he enjoys a good relationship with Griezmann. So there's every chance that he might stay on if they can produce a project that will entice him. Only because as great as United is, and obviously, you know, it's the Premier League and all that, you know, it's not like they're going to have a great chance of winning the league or the Champions League. So there is a chance that he'll do very well with Atletico Madrid, at least in the Champions League. They did reach 2 finals in 3 years. And perhaps if he's convinced, but he said himself when asked this question that it's a 6 out of 10. Then he retracted it and said, oh no, you know, there's a very good chance I'm going to stay here as well. I really don't know, but I just feel like they're focusing again on the wrong players. I'm not saying that he's not a great talent. He's certainly the best, but at the moment they need to focus on buying midfielders, you know, players who can actually pass the ball or help release the likes of Paul Pogba and Griezmann ahead of them if they do decide to buy him. But once again, they're focusing on attacking talent, which just frustrates me so much.
Frustrating, is it, Tim? Attacking talent?
No, because I always think that a team, all right, you don't win championships if you give away silly goals. But I always think that the way that you define a team is by its creative possibilities.
Dear World Football Phone-In, says John in Huddersfield, with the biggest game in world football, the championship playoff. No, it is a big game. It's a huge game.
It's huge.
It's worth a lot of money.
I'm with him.
It's worth a lot of money.
No, I'm laughing because of the way you said it.
Well, I had to do the pause, didn't I? Is anybody in the rest of the world going to have any idea who Huddersfield or Reading are? In your part of the world,
Reading,
Tim?
they know, don't they? From if they've been following the Premier League for the last few years as they have, then they've learnt Reading, and Huddersfield might come as a challenge, but not if you know your history. You know your Dennis Laws and your Bill Shankleys and your Frank Worthingtons. Then you know it's a great opportunity to learn about the industrial history of English football.
Yeah, but does anybody in Europe know?
Yeah, well, Germany is going to know him. Know him. Sorry,
know them. Yeah,
Huddersfield. Their
Why?
coach, because of their coach.
Okay.
David Wagner.
Yeah.
He is still their coach, right? I don't follow these. I don't follow Huddersfield.
Okay.
But from what I understood, he left at the time Borussia Dortmund 2. You know, there's. I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have called it that. Their younger version of them to join Huddersfield, and he was considered really highly regarded for his tactics, for his ability to play defensive football and ensure fluidity. For securing a strong defense, not defensive football. And he has a German mother, and he played for various different German teams, Mainz, Schalke, Eintracht Frankfurt. So I'm sure, Germany is following Huddersfield strongly. And I think their second coach now, the Borussia Dortmund junior team has lost second team has lost their coach again, and to another English side. I think it's Norwich. Norwich has just taken another coach from Germany as well, from Borussia Dortmund.
Lil Presh wants to know if Keita is worth 50 million quid, Tim. Do you know who he is?
Keita.
No,
It's Keita. Oh, apologies.
From Lazio.
Okay, apologies, yeah. Keita. Is he worth 50 million? And if he signed for Liverpool, would it impact Coutinho's potential switch to a deeper role?
Interesting. Is he worth 50 million? No, absolutely not. But very few people, in my opinion, are worth that. Quick winger. He's, close control, really unpredictable, can score very important goals against very important opponents. But severely lacking in tactical intelligence. And that really bothers me. Imagine Juan Cuadrado. I don't know if you watch him often, but it's like the guy just zooms ahead, so much ability, so much talent, just doesn't always necessarily channel it in the best way possible. Same can be said about him. Now, that's not my issue with him. The 50 million, this is a guy who's constantly having arguments, constantly saying, I want to leave, or the clubs. He has a huge ego. He's tended to fall out with his coaches. He fell out with Eddie Reha and what was the name of him? Petkovic before him. After him or before him. I don't remember now. He wants to be sold one moment. The next moment he's like, no, actually, I'm going to stay and I'm going to give it my all. At the start of the season, Simone Inzaghi was saying that he wasn't sure about the player's attitude and whether he could trust him and rely on him. And then he just came out saying, I'm not going to have anyone doubt my ability or my word. When I say I'm injured, then I'm injured. It was all had to do with injury, basically, in preseason. He's just a guy who always creates problem in the dressing room. I don't think he's necessarily a guy who'll take it for the team. Having said that, he's had an exceptional season at Lazio. The club in general has had an excellent season, much of that owing to Inzaghi's tactical abilities and organizational skills, and he has managed to get the best out of him despite these problems. But I'm always wary about talking about attitudes because I feel like I'm a Juventus supporter, obviously, and I've always had a problem with Mario Mandzukic previously, before he joined my team, just seeing the way that he was with Atletico Madrid and for the Croatian national team. He always was a guy with a poor attitude, but he's just been a remarkable player at Juventus. And players do grow up if they do have the right coaches and they are happy where they are. So perhaps with a little time, he's still very young, but 50 million is a lot to spend on a guy that could just have another tantrum and not show up.
Tim, Yasin wants to know if the ultimate exponent of tiki-taki will be a team of quote-unquote robots optimizing space and moving up in the minimum number of steps.
What? Sorry.
Is this a protest about the absence of dribbling in tiki-taka football?
I think it
if
might
so,
be.
I think if so, I think that's harsh, because on the objective always was to suck in the opposition through that passing until you can create a one-against-one situation down the flanks for your dribblers to dribble in that zone of the pitch where the dribble gets them straight in on goal or gets them behind the defensive line. So good, well-played football has a place for possession and has a place for dribbling as well. Spain in their heyday, it was a little bit like, it was you took out Messi. You took out the thing that the Spanish couldn't produce themselves. And I suppose some people did see it as a little bit robotic. But whenever there's a kind of tiki-taka thing with Messi there is always an end product and an end aim. I know that Spain, there were times when Spain seemed to be using possession defensively. And maybe some people think that was a little bit robotic, but the idea when it's taken to its logical extreme to what it's supposed to be about is that you are passing the ball in order to create space for your talented dribblers.
But you're passing it side to side. That's part of the question, isn't it? That you're
you're always
forward.
finding angles.
Yeah,
you're always finding angles. It's like a geometric game. And one triangle opens up the possibility of another triangle and another triangle. It is bewitching and hypnotic, but it's never to the side and always diagonally.
Mina?
The key is to do it really quickly where, it's exactly that, to create a one-on-one situation for those who have the pace and who've exploited the right spaces to do something with it. But there is no right side of football, or people always talk about whether tiki-taka is. You have, like, Ajax, what you noticed is that they are following the Barcelona blueprint or the Johan Cruyff blueprint. And they've been exceptional this season, trying to play that style of football, creating so many chances for their star striker, Kasper Dolberg. But I think what you saw against Manchester United in the final was how it can be stopped. And you have to be an exceptional team to work at your ideals and make them work against every opponent. It just seemed like most of the time they were keeping possession for the sake of it, and they had no idea how to open up avenues. They are obviously a very young side, and they didn't necessarily have a plan B, but you can't criticize them for it. But it just looked like it wasn't penetrative enough. They didn't know, they didn't have the right runners or the right necessarily intelligence to overcome United. And it can be boring to watch, but any style of football can be excellent or boring to watch. It's just about how you translate those ideals onto the pitch. And if you do it right, then anything's good to watch.
I guess this is for both of you. From Brian, will Alexis Sanchez be in the Bundesliga or Serie A next season? I'm thinking Serie A. I'm sure Arsenal fans won't enjoy listening to this. What do you reckon, Tim?
Well, Mina's closer to this one than I am, but a couple of factors here. One, obviously, is that Arsenal haven't made the Champions League. Another is that this year is going to be his fourth consecutive summer tournament in a row. World Cup, 2 Copa Americas, now the Confederations Cup, with a big chance of the World Cup next year. That's 5 consecutive summer tournaments. When Arsene Wenger was in his prime, he tended to sell players when they were around that age, 28, 29, when they were that age, when even before you'd noticed their decline, Wenger would kind of offload them. And you have to wonder if all of this international football and the absence of a summer break will undermine his effectiveness. So if I was asked Wenger, I might be tempted to cash in.
And Mina, Serie A or Bundesliga in terms of cashing in?
It was Serie A because Juventus were interested in him, but I feel like for the money they'd rather go for Angel Di Maria if they have a chance, although they probably don't have that chance. From what I understand, Bayern Munich really do want Sanchez. They've identified him as being versatile and good enough to take part in the team, and he is tactically he's well versed, having played in all the leagues, and they think they can get him. But he's been offered a bumper contract by Arsenal, so it'll be interesting to see if he leaves. I actually don't know whether they should cash in. I feel like he's the only guy that makes a difference for them, because I don't really trust Ozil to be consistent.
Go on.
But yeah, Bundesliga.
Sorry, Suhail wants to know who's the best youngster in Brazil at the moment.
Well, the one who's getting all the attention. Is Vinicius Junior. It's an extraordinary amount of money. Apart from that, I think that the cupboard isn't great, and a lot of the people. You look at the list of the top scorers for last year's Brazilian Championship, and they're all over 30. And the joint top goal scorer was Fregi from the World Cup. And there are people that honestly, now lie down, Mina, lie down. There are people calling for Fregi to be recalled to the Brazilian national team. That tells you
How old is he?
33, something like that. Yeah.
Well, look,
that's okay. Up to 36, I can accept it.
There's another reason why she has to lie down, because Ian in Rochdale is saying, please ask Mina about her comments at the start of the season that Conte would not be a success at Chelsea. At the time, Mina had the opinion that Conte had not done that well at her beloved Juve and had been a bit lucky.
No, I didn't say that he wouldn't be a success. I said that, firstly, if he is playing in 3 different competitions, I doubt his success. A lot of it is the fact that Chelsea had 1 competition to play. I know that we're talking about the FA Cup final now, but for much of the season, he's playing once a week. His tactics are very tiring. They're exhaustive. And if he's relying on these wing-backs to go back and forth when they're playing 3 times a week, I'm interested to see what happens, if I'm honest. Tactically, I've always had question marks about him because when it came to European opponents, he didn't necessarily know what to do or how to play his side to ensure success. And so I was left with question marks. What has impressed me is it looks like he's learned from some of his mistakes. He's a great motivational manager. I will still stand by the fact that he takes too long sometimes to make the right substitutions. Again, I'm really sorry, but this isn't the strongest league that we've ever seen. Manchester City hardly performed to expectations. United is waiting for the Europa League so that they can try to make the Champions League, you know. At the end of the day, a guy like Conte it was a relatively easy season for him, in my opinion. He changed one thing about the side. He's got very good players. He just needed to make sure that they were defensively strong. I'm interested to see what happens next season and whether or not he can do something special to make sure these guys can perform 3 times a week, not burn out, or whether he can change the tactics to play one style when it comes to English football and the English league, and then change it.
But at least
European.
But at least he knows the Spuds will capitulate at some point or other towards the end of the season, as they always do. But it's true, though, isn't it?
Glorious defeats. I'm all in favour of them.
They're amazing.
Akaicho in Tokyo says, did Tim say that the winner of the Peruvian Cup goes to Division 1 and the loser goes to Division 2? Explain, please.
He did.
Explain very quickly.
The winner of the Peruvian Cup goes straight into the first division and the loser goes straight into the second division.
Why? How?
Well, it's a national cup competition to decentralise the league. So, you know, the winner goes straight into the first division and the loser goes straight into the second division.
I tried to ask, Tim. Thank you very much, Mina. Many thanks.
Can't say fairer than that, although I just did.
On digital and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
bbc.co.uk/5live.